They executed the creator of the universe because they thought it would protect their empires. They had absolutely no idea they had just sealed their own apocalyptic destruction. History tracks what happened to Jesus on Sunday. But what history tries to hide is the terrifying wave of divine vengeance that hunted down every single man who conspired to kill him. Within 40 years, every one of them would be destroyed, their families slaughtered, their wealth reduced to ash, and the Golden Temple burned to rubble. Not one stone left standing on another. This is the horrifying true story of how God systematically dismantled the men who murdered his son. Before we dive into the terrifying downfall of the high priests, please subscribe to Bible Origins so you never miss another deep dive into the hidden history of Scripture. To understand why these men had to die, you first need to understand what they were protecting. It was not God. It was not the Torah. It was money, staggering amounts of money. And at the top of the mountain of blood-soaked gold sat a former high priest named Annas. Annas had been deposed from the high priesthood by Rome in 15 AD, but removal from office meant nothing. He still controlled Jerusalem like a retired mafia boss, controlling the family from behind closed doors. He installed 5 of his sons into the high priesthood, rotating them through the most powerful religious office on earth as if it were a family business. Then he installed his son-in-law, Joseph Caiaphas, as sitting high priest. Every decision, every negotiation with Rome, every transaction flowing through the temple ran through Annas first. He was the godfather of Jerusalem. His power came from economic domination. The Jerusalem Talmud records the bazaars of the sons of Annas, commercial stalls inside the temple courts where every pilgrim was forced to purchase sacrificial animals. You could not bring your own lamb. Inspectors employed by the Annas family would declare your animal ritually unfit and redirect you to family-owned stalls, charging 5, 10, sometimes 20 times market price. It was not worship. It was a religious extortion racket generating millions in today's currency, operating under the sacred canopy of the house of God. During Passover, Jerusalem's population of 50,000 swelled to over 1 million. Every family needed a lamb. Every lamb needed temple certification. Approximately 250,000 Passover lambs were slaughtered in a single afternoon. The blood ran so thick through drainage channels that it poured from the southern wall and turned the Kidron Valley literally crimson. You could smell the iron of blood and burning fat from a mile away. Every drop of that blood, every transaction, every manipulated exchange rate funneled gold into one ruthless dynasty, the House of Annas. This was the billion-dollar criminal enterprise that Jesus walked into when he braided a whip, overturned the money changers' tables, scattered coins across the stone floor, and drove the merchants out. He was not making a theological statement. He was physically attacking the primary revenue stream of the most dangerous family in Judea. He was flipping the tables of the Godfather. From that moment, the kill order was signed. Not because Jesus committed blasphemy, because he threatened the money. What followed was the most illegal judicial proceeding in ancient Near East history. The Mishnah forbade capital trials at night, on the eve of festivals in private residences, and issuing death sentences the same day as the verdict. Annas and Caiaphas violated every single protection in ours. They dragged Jesus through darkness to Annas's mansion for interrogation, then transferred him to Caiaphas's courtyard, where a hand-picked council waited to deliver a predetermined guilty verdict before sunrise. This was not a trial. This was a coordinated assassination under fraudulent religious law. Caiaphas spoke words that would echo through eternity. He said it was expedient that one man should die for the people, rather than the whole nation perish. He meant it politically, protecting his family's empire. But God used the mouth of the man who murdered his son to prophesy the very purpose of the cross. One man would indeed die for the people, and his death would save not just one nation, but every soul who would ever call on his name. Caiaphas stood over the beaten Messiah, convinced his dynasty was permanently secure. But he was blind to what was already in motion. Just 3 years later, the Roman Empire would turn on them, and the first man to fall would not be a priest. It would be the Roman executioner himself. Pontius Pilate never wanted Jesus dead. He examined Jesus and found no basis for charges. His wife sent a desperate message warning him of a terrifying dream about this righteous man. Pilate washed his hands before the mob, declaring himself innocent. He tried releasing Jesus under Passover amnesty. He tried substituting Barabbas, hoping the crowd would choose the teacher over the murderer. He tried every maneuver to avoid signing the execution order. He failed every time because Caiaphas possessed one weapon Pilate could not defend against. "If you let this man go," the high priest declared, "you are no friend of Caesar." That single sentence ended the debate. Being publicly accused of disloyalty to the emperor was a potential death sentence. Pilate was a mid-level bureaucrat already on thin ice with Tiberius, desperately trying to survive in one of the empire's most volatile provinces. If word reached Rome that he released a man, allowing crowds to call him king, his career, wealth, family, and likely his life would be finished. So Pilate did what cowards always do when confronted with truth. He chose his career. He washed his hands, signed the death warrant, and sent the Son of God to be nailed to a Roman cross on Golgotha. Now here is where this story becomes deeply, uncomfortably personal. It is incredibly easy to sit comfortably right now, 2,000 years removed from the dust and blood, and judge the mob screaming, "Crucify him," in Pilate's courtyard. But stop and ask yourself an honest question. If you were standing in Jerusalem's dust that Friday morning, surrounded by the terrified atmosphere of an occupied city during Passover, what side would you actually have been on? Statistically, you would not have been standing with the 12 disciples. They all ran. Peter denied even knowing his name 3 times. If you cared about political stability and your family's safety, you would have wanted Jesus dead because he threatened the fragile Roman peace, keeping your city from burning. If you loved your religious traditions, you would have wanted him dead because he humiliated the priesthood and claimed authority, making the entire establishment obsolete. If you valued your job, reputation, or social standing, Jesus of Nazareth was a bleeding, horrific inconvenience to your comfortable life. Human nature has not changed in 2,000 years. Without the Holy Spirit, you would have been chanting right alongside Caiaphas's mob. Now, back to the man who washed his hands. Did executing the Son of God save Pilate's career? No. Just 36 months after signing Christ's death warrant, Pilate made a catastrophic blunder. He massacred a group of Samaritans gathered peacefully at Mount Gerizim. The brutality was so excessive, it triggered immediate formal complaint. Lucius Vitellius, the powerful Roman legate of Syria and Pilate's direct superior, was furious. Vitellius personally traveled to Jerusalem, violently stripped Pilate of his governorship, and ordered him back to Rome in complete disgrace. Then Pilate vanished from official Roman records. The empire he sold his soul to protect quietly erased him from history. But early church historians refused to let his story die. Eusebius, writing in the 4th century, uncovered the dark truth of Pilate's final days. Exiled to Gaul, to Vienne in modern-day France, his mind shattered under guilt and the brutal terror of Caligula's reign. Stripped of wealth, stripped of every title, haunted by the memory of the Nazarene whose blood he could never wash from his hands, Pontius Pilate took his own life. The man who publicly washed his hands of innocent blood drowned privately in his own despair. He traded his eternal soul for a Roman career, and the Roman emperor took that career from him anyway. The irony is so devastating, so perfectly poetic, it reads like divine authorship. Because it was. Pilate washed his hands of the blood and he drowned in it anyway. But what Rome did to Pilate was nothing compared to what God was about to do to Caiaphas. The exact same Roman legate who destroyed Pilate's career, Lucius Vitellius, arrived in Jerusalem and turned his attention to the temple. Recognizing the deeply entrenched corruption, nepotism, financial exploitation of pilgrims, and political instability it generated, Vitellius made a swift and decisive move. Josephus records it plainly in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 18, Chapter 4. Besides which, he also deprived Joseph, who was also called Caiaphas, of the high priesthood. That single, cold, bureaucratic sentence is the political obituary of the most arrogant man in Judea. Joseph Caiaphas, who had declared with supreme confidence that it is better for one man to die for the people than for the whole nation to perish, was violently removed from the most powerful religious office on earth by a pagan Roman governor who worshipped Jupiter and Mars. The sacred garments of God's chosen high priest, the holiest vestments in the ancient world, were physically stripped from his body by a Gentile politician who did not even believe the God of Israel existed. The devastating irony is inescapable. The man who tore the robes of the Messiah during the illegal midnight trial had his own robes torn from him by a pagan. Then came something far worse than dramatic public execution. Caiaphas was handed a punishment that, for a man of his psychology, was far more agonizing than any physical death. He was handed irrelevance. God did not strike Caiaphas with lightning. God did not send an angel to slay him. Instead, God gave the most prideful, power-addicted narcissist in the nation the one thing a narcissist cannot survive. God gave him obscurity. After his deposition, Caiaphas was forced to sit in powerless retirement and watch helplessly as the Jesus movement he tried to crush through state-sponsored execution exploded uncontrollably across the Roman Empire. The followers of the man he condemned were filling synagogues in every major city, converting thousands to the way, performing signs and wonders in Jesus' name, spreading the gospel from Jerusalem to Antioch, to Corinth, to Rome itself. The movement was unstoppable, unkillable. Every arrest, every flogging, every execution of an apostle only made it grow faster. And the man who orchestrated the crucifixion specifically to prevent this outcome could do absolutely nothing to stop it. He faded into complete, total, pathetic historical silence. No ancient historian records how he died, where he died, or when he died. He simply vanished from the record, swallowed by the irrelevance he feared more than death. But in 1990, nearly 2,000 years after his fall, Israeli archaeologists excavated a first-century burial cave south of Jerusalem's Old City in the Peace Forest. Inside that cave, among several ossuaries, they discovered an ornately carved limestone bone box inscribed Yehoseph bar Caiapha, translated as Joseph, son of Caiaphas. Inside were the skeletal remains of a man approximately 60 years old. While the man Joseph Caiaphas, condemned to death, ascended to the right hand of the Father and reigns over the entire universe for all eternity, while his name is whispered in prayer by billions across every continent. The bones of the high priest who pronounced his death sentence sat rotting in a limestone box, buried in dirt and darkness, completely forgotten by every generation since, until archaeologists with shovels accidentally dug him up. Caiaphas died powerless. Pilate died insane. But the true, horrifying climax of the blood curse had not yet fallen. Remember what the manipulated mob shouted in Pilate's courtyard that morning? "His blood be on us and on our children." They spoke those words carelessly, as if meaningless, as if they carried no weight. For 30 long years it appeared as if nothing happened, but God does not forget a single syllable spoken in His presence. And 30 years later, He answered the curse with fury that would reshape the entire trajectory of human civilization. The blood curse did not fall on the Jewish people as an ethnicity or race. That interpretation is a grotesque, anti-Semitic distortion that God Himself would condemn. Thousands of ordinary Jewish men and women became the very first Christians. They were the founding pillars of the early church. They carried the gospel from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth. The curse fell precisely where it was earned, on the Sadducean billionaire cartel, on the sons and grandsons and political heirs of Annas, and on the corrupt aristocratic priesthood that had cynically weaponized the sacred office of God to murder His Son for profit. The elder Annas, the godfather who started it all, who ordered the original arrest of Jesus, who conducted the first illegal interrogation in his mansion, died around 40 AD. But one of his sons, also named Ananus, rose through the priestly aristocracy in following decades. When the Jewish revolt against Roman occupation erupted in 66 AD, Ananus the Younger was elected as one of the supreme commanders of besieged Jerusalem. He attempted to lead the moderate faction in desperate two-front defense, fighting Roman legions pressing from outside, while simultaneously battling violent fanatical zealot factions, tearing the city apart from within. He failed catastrophically. In 68 AD, the Zealots, in terrifying alliance with brutal Idumean warriors they invited into the city, breached Jerusalem's inner defenses. They stormed the temple precincts and began systematic, merciless slaughter of the priestly elite, the very class that had ruled Israel for generations. Ananus the Younger, son of the godfather who arrested Jesus, was cut down and butchered inside the sacred temple walls. His body was thrown out without burial, left to rot in public as warning. Josephus, who personally witnessed the horrors of the Jewish war, recorded the moment with devastating finality in Jewish War, Book 4. "I should not mistake if I said that the death of Ananus was the beginning of the destruction of the city, and that from this very day may be dated the overthrow of her wall and the ruin of her affairs." The godfather had said, "His blood be on us and on our children." His children were butchered like sacrificial animals inside the very temple where they sentenced Jesus to die. But God was not finished. The final apocalyptic act of the blood curse was still descending. In 70 AD, Roman General Titus, son of Emperor Vespasian, arrived at Jerusalem's walls with 70,000 heavily armed, battle-hardened soldiers. He surrounded the city completely and sealed it shut. No food entered the gates, no water passed through the aqueducts, no man, woman, or child escaped. What followed over the next several months was not conventional military siege. It was a slow, suffocating, nightmarish descent into the most complete and total human hell the ancient world had ever witnessed. Josephus, who was present at the siege and personally witnessed its horrors, records that the famine inside the sealed walls became so extreme, so utterly dehumanizing, that it shattered the most fundamental bonds of human civilization. He records the account of a woman from a wealthy family named Mary of Beth Ezob, who, driven to the absolute brink of madness and starvation, committed an act so horrifying that even battle-scarred zealot soldiers could not stomach it. She roasted and consumed her own infant son. When zealot fighters smelled the cooking meat and burst into her home, swords drawn, demanding she hand over whatever food she was hiding, she revealed what she had done and offered them the remains. Josephus records that even these hardened, blood-soaked killers recoiled in absolute horror and stumbled out of the house, shaking, unable to speak. The siege had stripped Jerusalem of everything that once made it holy: dignity, humanity, sanity, hope. The dead bodies inside the walls multiplied so rapidly there was no longer space to bury them, no one with strength to carry them, and no ground left to receive them. They were piled in open streets and stacked inside the very courts of the temple, the sacred marble floors that once held the Ark of the Covenant, the floors above which the Shekinah glory of the living God had once visibly dwelled in a cloud of fire, were now drowning in blood and decomposing flesh of the very priests and their descendants who had stood in that exact courtyard and orchestrated the crucifixion of the Messiah. And then came the most devastating irony in the entire recorded history of divine judgment. The exact Roman execution system, crucifixion, the very method of torture and public humiliation that Annas, Caiaphas, and Pontius Pilate had deliberately weaponized to execute one single innocent man on a hill called Golgotha, was turned back on their nation by God Himself at an industrial, apocalyptic, almost inconceivable scale. As starving Jewish rebels and desperate civilians attempted to flee the besieged city under cover of darkness, Roman soldiers captured them by the hundreds every single night and crucified them in full view of the city walls. Josephus, who stood on the Roman side of the siege line and watched this horror unfold with his own eyes, recorded the scene in Jewish War, Book 5. So the soldiers, out of the wrath and hatred they bore the Jews, nailed those they caught, one after one way and another after another, to the crosses, by way of jest, when their multitude was so great that room was wanting for the crosses, and crosses wanting for the bodies, room wanting for the crosses, and crosses wanting for the bodies. The Roman war machine, the most efficient military force the ancient world had ever produced, physically ran out of timber. They ran out of physical space along the walls to erect more crosses. The single instrument of execution that these three men, Annas, Caiaphas, and Pilate, had used to silence the voice of the Son of God was turned back on their descendants at a scale so massive that the entirety of the Roman army could not keep up with the demand. And then the temple itself burned. The Roman soldiers set fire to the sacred complex. The enormous gold-plated roof melted in the inferno, and the liquefied gold ran down in rivers into the cracks between the massive ancient foundation stones. When the flames finally died and the rubble cooled, the Roman soldiers, driven by insatiable greed that cared nothing for holiness, tore apart every single remaining stone of the temple with crowbars and bare hands to retrieve the solidified gold that had seeped between them. They dismantled the entire sacred structure, stone by stone, block by block, until nothing remained but bare, blackened, scorched bedrock. And in their greed, the Romans accidentally and unknowingly fulfilled a prophecy that Jesus of Nazareth had spoken 40 years earlier, standing in that very courtyard, looking at those very stones, while his disciples marveled at the temple's magnificence. Jesus had said to them plainly, "Do you see all these great buildings? Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." The greed of Rome completed the judgment of God. The men who killed Jesus specifically to protect the temple destroyed the temple. The dynasty of Annas was erased from existence. The Sadducean priesthood ceased to exist as an institution. The billionaire cartel that had ruled Jerusalem for generations